Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana and today I'm here with my April wrap-up. The first book I reread in April was King's Rising by C.S. Pacat. This is the third and final book in the Captive Prince trilogy. I knew when I read this book for the first time last February that a reread of this trilogy, but specifically this book, would mess me up because every minuscule detail would take on a new meaning and I would be able to fully appreciate the characters to the extent they deserve, and I was right. C.S. Pacat has such a deft hand in orchestrating these subtle yet powerful moments of symmetry, piecing together these incredible parallels that call to mind the events of Book 1 and force the reader to confront how much has changed and how the characters are in an entirely different place, a place they never could have even imagined for themselves. And you also get to witness as the romance between Damon and Laurent transitions from a private, almost isolated relationship to a public entity, and you realize how much positive change they both can bring not only into each other's lives, but in both of their countries as a true symbol of unity. Rereading this was one of the best choices I ever could have made. I gave this book 5 stars all over again. Then for Tome Topple, I read Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is an own voices story about Ifemelu and Obinze, a young couple in Nigeria who drift apart and lose touch once Ifemelu goes to study in America and Obinze moves to London, where he lives as an undocumented immigrant. Many years later, as adults, they begin to rekindle their relationship and reconnect when they both find themselves heading back to live in Nigeria. The story takes an honest look at the trauma immigrants have to deal with when coming to America, how they're expected to minimize their culture, their beliefs, the way they talk, the way they look, the way they dress. And make no mistake, it is a type of trauma to be so brutally forced to assimilate. What's more, you can see how Ifem resists this assimilation not just once, but every single day. And then when she immigrates back to Nigeria, it's fascinating to see how many of America's societal ideals she's unconsciously internalized, and that in turn makes her a stranger in her own country in some ways. This story is also very much about women and how the choices women are expected to make will never be right or easy. It's so difficult to just exist when the odds and the expectations are so severely stacked against you, and that's yet another layer in this book. Overall, I really enjoyed this despite some of its glaring cliches, but I gave Americana 4 stars. Then also for Tome Topple, I read An Accident of Stars by Foz Meadows. This is own voices queer fantasy about a girl named Saffron who follows a mysterious woman through a tear in reality only to end up trapped in another world called Kenna, which has recently fallen to civil war and is being torn apart from the inside out. Saffron ends up falling in with a band of dangerous women who have put a man called Vexladen on the throne, only to have their loyalty betrayed once he reveals himself to be a ruthless tyrant. However, Saffron may be the key to unseating this leader and bringing peace. What I appreciate most about this story by far is that it's chock full of great, much needed representation. The main character, Saffron, is bisexual, and as the story goes on, she develops a romance with a trans character. Another main character is aromantic, and she's also in a healthy polyamorous relationship, which seems to be fairly normal for Kenna, and even characters who aren't assigned specific labels seem to be pretty open with their identities. And it will always be important to see those identities and that acceptance normalized on the page. Putting that aside, I wanted to love this story more than I actually did. In the end, I understand how this world and these cultures operate, but even after 500 pages, I can't see the bigger picture. I don't understand why it's necessary for the main character to be from modern day Earth if the bulk of this story's conflict and focus is centered in Kenna and nowhere else. Like, the fact that Saffron has an entire family and a life back on Earth seems to have very little impact or relevance. And just in general, what killed this story for me was the fact that it was so full of convenience. Anytime shit hit the fan, something or someone would conveniently fall into the character's laps and everything would be okay. Any prolonged tension this story could have had was short-lived, and I was never truly concerned for the characters. Like I said, I do appreciate all the representation and the fact that this is a portal fantasy that accurately and honestly portrays how much it sucks to be thrown into a violent world that you know nothing about, because no matter how much you pick up, you will always be missing out on the nuances that come with lived experience. It had its ups and its downs, and because of that, I gave it 3 stars. Then my poetry collection for the month of April was Elegies in Blue by Benjamin Elere Sainz. Sainz truly lays himself bare as he explores his roots, his family, his beliefs, his identity, growing up in El Paso, and how his life is very much about living life on the border in more than one way. He is just a storyteller through and through. His poetry bleeds into his prose and vice versa. You can really see how being a poet makes him a better writer, period. That's what I love about his poetry. It's controlled and thoughtful, but it's never ambiguous. He's going to tell you how he feels. He's going to tell you a full and complete story, even if it's told in pieces and images. He tends to have longer poems, but it works because the payoff and the ideas he discovers as he writes are worth it. There's also a really great essay in here about how all writing is inherently political and necessary in introducing discomfort and by extension change, and that was such a powerful piece. One poem in particular does engage in mild transphobia, and while I don't think it comes from a place of hatred but rather a place of misunderstanding, regardless of intent, it's still not okay, and for that reason I bumped my rating down to 4.5 stars. Then for the BookTube SFF Awards, I read the first 2 volumes of Descender by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. This series is about a futuristic society that's been ravaged by these huge, violent robots called the Harvesters, and after this attack on humanity, all common robots, androids, and AI units were culled or forcibly removed from society. Entire planets away, a young boy robot named Tim-21, one of the only remaining free robots, is stranded and searching for his human family until one day when officials show up and take possession of him because they believe he may be linked in some way to the Harvesters. I've been thinking a lot lately about how narratives involving androids and AIs are such natural representations for what it means to be marginalized or to be a minority in any way. Stories like this are about extraordinary, varied communities that are watered down to fit certain stereotypes so that they become feared or hated. They can speak for themselves, yet they're silenced at every turn and they're seen as lesser. That is a narrative I have lived. It's one that I can identify with. In many ways, this series explores the dynamic between the oppressor and the oppressed, how the oppressed will inevitably rise up, rebel, resist, and how everything they have to suffer will just serve as fuel to the fire once they decide to tell their own story in their own way. To me, this series is visually and politically triumphant. It gives me so much to think about. I'm definitely eager to continue on, but I gave these first 2 volumes 5 stars apiece. And the last book I read in April was the Ever Never Handbook by Somen Chainani. This is an awesome companion to the School for Good and Evil series, intended to be read between The Last Ever After and the release of book 4, so it was kind of perfect, uncanny timing on my part. This beautifully crafted book is bursting with incredible extras on the fairy tale world and the school. You can read through syllabi, course descriptions, profiles on the teachers, students, alumni, graduating class. You get an inside look at the application process, but also it's just a really satisfying, fun read for anyone who loves this series. Plus, it gives you a nice refresher on some of the major events from The Last Ever After, while also dropping some huge, major, significant, exciting hints about what to expect from book 4, and I just can't wait for its release. This is a truly stunning book that deserves to be read cover to cover. I highly recommend it for fans of this series, and I gave it 5 stars. So those are all the books I read in April. In the comments below, feel free to share your thoughts on any of these books, or let me know what are your reading plans for May and how are they working out. But that is everything I had for this wrap up today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!